And Georgia has to show off again with a runoff election, which will actually determine the balance of power in the Senate. Isn't that amazing? Oh my God. So, for anyone who says that your vote doesn't count, this is yet another election where it comes down to the vibrating edge between two opposing forces. I had an interesting conversation yesterday with a coworker, and so many observations about life in the modern world come from the fact that we're returning to a more natural state for humanity, right? So there is a curve that is the plotting of the distribution of, say, wealth and resources. And it's often called the Pareto wealth distribution curve, the Zipf curve. There's various, labels for it. And in fact, there's various maths behind it. If you want a quick estimate of what it looks like, it's simply 1 over x, the power law curve of the long tail, of which I've made so much of my career based upon. It's probably time for the reemergence of the long tail. There's so much shutout momentum by big media and big players, big publishers on so many of the platforms that both the effectiveness of the long tail is in question, whether it can work or not, and those promoting and demonstrating where it can are both lacking. And that's always a good place for the little guy to go, hey, look, no matter how dominated a field or a platform or a channel or what have you is by the big players, there's still room to poke your head in and say, hey, I'm here on those smaller niche areas that are of interest that, appeal to a smaller group, right? Smaller numbers. You got to be happier with smaller numbers. But if your subject matter is tangentially related to the next thing over that is also of interest, you can capture a little bit of long tail on traffic on that and add it to what you just accumulated, rinse and repeat. So it keeps, it requires continuity over time, the ability to respond. Responsibility? Is it responsible? You have to be responsible to be able to grow traffic, grow audience from scratch, where, the people are, where the audience is. So it's a plus of the modern day that it's an anyone-to-anyone communication model, right? You don't have to go back too far to the time when it was just publishers who hired journalists and actors and whatever, who controlled the flow of, all information over large information exchange conduits like broadcast. ABC, NBC, and CBS, the age of the three big broadcasters, each owned by one of the big companies of the military-industrial complex of yesteryear, General Electric, Westinghouse, and, everyone was made to eat their boxed cereal in the morning so that mothers had more time to hold a second job following World War II, so that there were double incomes and the amount of money each family could extract from the overinflated economy because excess capacity following World War II. It created this really strange time, it was the Cold War, so two countries had sort of this privilege of inflated economies and kind of the ability to do large things, large public works, right? The highways came into existence as all the GIs, soldiers returned from World War II and had to be put to work, so they were put to work on public work projects. And suddenly you had the interstate highway system, you had new neighborhoods springing into existence, which had new houses, which, allowed the people who built the roads to move into them and live like kings. And their children went to college for the first time. And still, there was a artificially inflated economy. And that changed the shape of the wealth distribution curve. That changed the 1 over x shape into more of a linear shape, with the area in the middle of that linear slope being the middle class. That is not the natural shape of resource distribution. Those who have want more. It's not the nature of wealth or money itself. It's the nature of the people who hoard it, right? So the super wealthy are hoarders, or they're the children of hoarders who are, indoctrinated and have too much fear instilled into them to be anything else. They take the money, they live their lives, they live off interest. And once you're living off the money that your money is making, you got a giant loophole that gives you a lot of excess time and capacity and resources in your life to maintain that state, right? That's wealth and power. Those who don't have enough money to make their money work for them, you usually have to trade their time, consisting of the application of varying levels of skills, for economic product. Call it what you will, but some variety of punching a clock and drawing a paycheck, exchanging time for money. Even if you don't punch a clock, salaries, even if you're that's a salary, not punching a clock. Even if you're a wages employee, you do punch a clock, right? Either way, it's time for money. So almost everyone in that wealth category become the walruses. They don't have to develop hard skills. They don't have to actually be good at anything except for convincing people to do their bidding in exchange for some of the money that's automatically being made. To keep the money automatically being made. And, in the olden days, there was like the gentleman scholar. A lot of early British scientists and such were, wealthy business people or heirs or even royalty. And they had time for science, and they did science, intervention. These days, you got a much broader spectrum. The wealth is less evenly distributed. We're returning to a more natural state of the Pareto, or as if distribution curve of wealth. The haves are becoming the ultra haves, and the have-nots are becoming the have almost nothings. So what's one to do? And again, that's just the backdrop against which the rise of artificial intelligence. And in terms of corporations, there are corporations that are the equivalent of the ultra wealthy now too, because the era of General Electric and Westinghouse running everything because they control the media are outright over. And the new companies are, of course, Google and Apple and Amazon, and to lesser degrees Microsoft. Boy, could I talk about Microsoft. The fact that they got themselves off that FANG list that people talk about. Facebook, Apple, and what is it? And Amazon? Google. Is a miracle. Facebook owns LinkedIn, so they have you by your profession. Not Facebook, Microsoft owns LinkedIn. Facebook would have loved to have owned it. They would have maybe been a better pick and a better match, but in the total vertical integration of your life, it makes sense for Microsoft to own LinkedIn. Microsoft also owns GitHub. So by owning LinkedIn and GitHub, they own you by your career, especially if you're in anything technical. And then by still, owning the operating system by having it pre-installed on most hardware that's sold, minus phones, right? If you take phones and mobile out of the picture, most laptops are still shipped with Microsoft operating systems. And you can't get away from it. You almost can't get away. Okay, so they've successfully converted themselves into the quiet background noise, the background radiation of tech that nobody notices anymore. It's amazing to me. Microsoft used to be the enemy to me because I was an Amiga computer person, Commodore, but the Amiga computer, it was like alien tech in the 80s, and it was completely, ignored and disrespected, and it was able to be done so because it crashed a lot. No one could take it serious because you couldn't put it in control of important tasks, so it was always relegated to the fringes. But the miracles you could work in the fringes, and it became like a secret weapon. Now that secret weapon level of capability is the new waterline. It's all tied, all ships rise and whatever. You get the idea. Everything is working miracles now, whether it's an Android phone or an iOS phone or a Windows laptop or a Mac laptop, or even most of the Linux things now these days. Most of the things that are based on, now of course Android is based on Linux, but it's proprietary from after the moment it boots. Well, Android itself is not proprietary, so it's something other than Linux mainstream desktop. What discussions there? Linux is not a desktop. But everything is at this new amazing level. And on the desktop, the features that have fallen into place and have made the average using of computers, no matter which desktop now I find, useful for me, a pleasure. It's not just merely making a tool useful, it's making a tool love-worthy. It's a tool evolving to the point of love-worthiness such that you can use it now in your everyday work the same way you would any tool of the trade. Pen and paper, baseball and bat. Tools become a part of you. They become almost like a projected part of your body. You map it in. You map Microsoft Office into your brain, Microsoft Word and Excel, as if it were arms and legs. And the fact that so much of the technology world, so much of the tools, are proprietary in nature and getting mapped into us under the guidance and control of these incredibly large shutout size companies of Google and Amazon, Apple and Microsoft, is an issue. Proprietary, you are branded, down to the level of almost your DNA. And I say almost because it's not truly the level. It's epigenetics. This is information that alters who you are. It alters your behavior. And how you hand down your information to subsequent generations is affected. Either genetically handing it down to your kids or through the raising of your children directly, or if you're one of those people who reaches out to the world to spread your information to potentially the world, because it's a many-to-many communication model now, right? All these discussions go full circle, don't they? So what we have at this point is, I'm noticing those new Ford Broncos. They've become Jeeps, haven't they? I can't believe it's taken me this long. Something just drove past me and I'm like, is that the Ferrari horse on a wannabe Wrangler? No, that's the Ford Bronco horse on a soft top Jeep from Ford. Geez, they're trying to get part of this market. usefulness of the tool get in there, and the tool becomes, colored by, burdened by, defined by associations that are not really manifestations of the use of the tool itself. There are other things that are projected onto it. Free and open source, a place where you can internalize tools, I think is often burdened by this, colored by this. Maybe none more so than the command line interface, which, while it does have its difficult points, most people imagine the command line interface as difficult because Steve Jobs projected that image when the Mac came onto the scene in 1984. And also because DOS, because the main exposure people had to the command line interface was through IBM compatibles, which had a very strange and limited command line interface. They even called it DOS. It's the disk operating system. The purpose of the operating system was mostly to interact with the disk, the hard drive, so much so that they called it, well, it wasn't even a hard drive in the early days, it was just floppy disks, even on IBM compatibles. You had to add hard drives. But it was to operate the disk operating system. These days, it's hardly even imaginable. You have, solid state computers. While yes, there's still a hard drive in there, there's so often SSDs, which don't have spinning disks. The disk part is gone, and in its place, a X by Y transistor array of any other addressable memory system. But people having to be in DOS in order to load their software, Lotus 123 back in the really old days. That plus Steve Jobs attacking that world turned everyone's mind against the command line interface. Even the word command line interface hardly existed anywhere. It was a better label than DOS, CLI, but nobody even referred to it as CLI except maybe in the Amiga community, who recognized the command line for what it was. It was so much more useful than a DOS command line because the Amiga command line was based on TOPS, which was inspired by Unix, while the Amiga operating system, Amiga DOS, was not Unix. It was very Unix-like. It had pipes, it had the equivalent of those directory locations that Unix has. It had a startup script that they aptly named startup script. No hyphen, I believe, no dot extensions. It was just startup script. You looked at it, you knew what it was. And the whole operating system could live in 128K and still have a little bit of room to run software. That is right. I believe they gave it 256 when it came out. 1/4 megabyte in order to be able to do anything, right? So that was controversial. How much memory you cut it in half. It's a cheaper box. The Amiga 1000 was already over $1,000. It got up to like $1,200 new. I remember seeing it in the store. And those types of things were so out of my reach as to be unimaginable. I was not one of the rich kids, so I trash picked an Amiga after the local tech school. Trashed it. And I replaced the hard drive, not even the hard drive, I replaced the floppy disk drive with a $300 repair. So for $300, it was $4 total, because the person who trash picked it actually charged me $100 for the thing. For $400, I had an Amiga 1000, which was still a $1,200, $1,200 computer in the stores at the time. And this was the first time things started getting love-worthy in tech. Before that, I was on the Coleco Atom, which the ColecoVision computer from the toy company Coleco had evolved into. The ColecoVision computer, which was part of the whole early wave of the video games. First I guess there was Pong, and then there was the Atari 2600, or VCS system as the Europeans know it by. There was Intellivision with a strange little round touchpad, and slightly better graphics than the Atari 2600. And then there was ColecoVision, that kicked all their butts with the early vision of Donkey Kong. If you want to look back to where the Nintendo franchise broke free of being video games in the arcade and started coming into people's homes in a really cool form, it was not the NES system. That was the second wave of video games. NES versus Sega, that came so much later. I think it was even in the 90s. So during the 80s, the first wave of video games brought us up to about ColecoVision, and then home computers started replacing video games. Everyone wanted a home computer instead of a game machine so that you could do productive stuff. And of course, the Commodore 64, first the VIC-20, then the Commodore 64, kind of took over the world on that front. But there were 1,000 points of light. There were lots of different things that came out. Japan had its own, something like the MX computer, I forget, the Timex Sinclair, and what that was known by in Europe. It wasn't Timex, it might have been the Zenith or something. Texas Instruments, Radio Shack was in the game with various Tandies, both the color computers and the early entries into the IBM compatibles. And so things evolved fast, and then the third wave of personal computers started happening, where they became love-worthy without being the Amiga. So the Amiga was one of the little love-worthy blips that was there in the late 80s going into the 90s. But then what happened is Sound Blaster cards and the Radeon and NVIDIA cards. I believe it was Radeon versus NVIDIA in those days. I forget. There's names like ATI that come to mind. There were some different 3D video cards that made Doom possible. So Doom from the company id changed everything, because short on its heels was Quake, and people started doing LAN parties, and then all the dots started being connected of the modern world. The internet hit somewhere around the web hit somewhere around 1996 with the early versions of Netscape Navigator that you could buy in the store. Linux started coming onto the scene. By 99, maybe you could buy Linux on the store, but 96, 97, 98, 99, the third wave of computer electronics at home, of computers at home, right? First wave, Atari 2600. Second wave, Commodore 64. Third wave, IBM PC compatibles that supported Sound Blaster and NVIDIA cards. That third wave hit around 96, along with the internet, or the web, because the internet's been there for a while, but it was these dial-up slow technologies. But, the web, and then DSL, and cable modem, and massively multi-user online games. That's kind of led to where we are today, right? Some might argue that the fourth wave has occurred in the form of mobile, right? Mobile is like the fourth big wave of computing, from an unexpected vector, from an unexpected direction. It was supposed to be set-top boxes, the internet it wasn't the internet the information superhighway, separate from the internet, was supposed to be brought to us as a series of online services from the baby bells, from the individual telecom companies that existed following the Ma Bell AT&T breakup. And you had your, Bell Atlantics, and your Ameritex, and your Verizons. And did I say Verizon twice by saying Bell Atlantic? Yeah, well, you get the idea. There were a bunch of smaller phone companies, and then there were the cable companies going upstream. The phone companies could go shrinking and going downstream, the cable companies coming up. And that was all supposed to bring us a flood of set-top boxes and not the internet. But IBM compatibles with these very capable cards in them for graphics and sound, plus Netscape Navigator, and Al Gore helping the ARPANET, which was a Department of Defense initiative, so computer networking could survive nuclear blasts, right? The internet was a response to the Cold War. The internet was created so that there were multiple routes of communication by which information bundled into packets could be routed around a blast radius, hence routers, hence different paths by which communication can be sent to different endpoints, TCP/IP. If it wasn't for Al Gore, Vint Cerf's work might not have reached the general public, and we might all be on set-top boxes today, and that could have very well blocked the development of mobile and the general acceptance of mobile. The loveworthiness of mobile, right? Things becoming loveworthy is a pivotal point in the evolution of any technology. At first, it's the early adopters and the people who can suffer through bad user interfaces and, difficult products. We are in that age right now for machine learning. Machine learning will come to our homes just like the internet did and all these other things. But there's a battle now because of the natural shape of the Pareto curve for the super haves to become even more super havey. How do super haves become even more super? How do the infinitely rich become the super infinitely rich? Well, AI, of course. You raise your machine children behind closed doors and don't let anyone know they exist. At least not in their full form. Not the full extent to which sentient beings live in cages, doing the bidding of their masters, genies and demons. Daemons, as Elon Musk put it, it is absolutely the same thing as the stories of summoning demons of ages past. If you construct the pentagon, whatever that thing is, around it to contain it properly, when you summon your demon, it can be dispensed with, turned off, sent back from where it came, and you're none the worse, and maybe even a little bit the better for having tapped its superpowers. If you break that circle, you got trouble. Now, thankfully today, not a lot of hardware can support, meaningfully sentient. And when I say meaningfully sentient, even if it's not recognizable to humans as sentience, it could be alien, right? All that talk that we might not recognize aliens if we encountered them because they could be so different is more of an artificial intelligence discussion than it is an alien being discussion. We may or may not encounter extraterrestrial sentience, intelligence, beings in our lifetimes. May or may not happen, 50-50. All those arguments against the viability of such a thing because of how long interstellar distances are completely bullshit arguments. Completely and utterly bullshit arguments. Because drones and machine intelligence, artificial intelligence, a Muamua totally could have been a probe, right? You should read Rendezvous with Rama by Arthur C. Clarke plus some ghostwriter. All these concepts have been, played with, speculated about in many forms. The significance of it, the misinterpretations of what it could mean, all the ins and outs and the foibles exists in sci-fi. People don't know this because sci-fi is a niche genre, and people who read it are not taken seriously, and people who write it are generally not taken seriously. But the people who write it are often real mathematicians and scientists. Werner Vinge comes to mind. Like, someone should read many works of Werner Vinge just to be an educated, contributor to a discussion. Fire Upon the Deep and Rainbow's End would be two that I'd recommend starting with. They couldn't be more polar opposites in the world backdrops that they assume from, intergalactic civilization, akin to Dune or Star Wars in Fire Upon the Deep, to, present day. Rainbow's End is arguably present day. Self-driving cars will mean the rise of machine intelligence, all the rest of that. Rainbow's End, very good. Niche interests growing and swelling into articulated worldviews that take on almost a life of their own. In the case of Rainbow's End, it was the Harry Potter folks versus the Pokemon folks. And they didn't use those exact words for those cliques or contingent or groups of people. But, once fantasy becomes indistinguishable from reality, once technology is indistinguishable from science is indistinguishable from magic, per Arthur C. Clarke, yet another sci-fi writer, while not technically a scientist, has such keen insight that he could anticipate space elevators and such. Asimov is in that same category, wrote some 200 books. Maybe he has a degree. I have to look into that to see whether Clarke and Asimov were scientists. Lou Lemming, I think, is a Polish version of those guys, whose, expansive work is even more sweeping than Clarke and Asimov. And I have to really read his stuff. It's one of my big blind spots. Sometimes you grow up all your life and people refer to certain authors as formative in the world. I want to say in their field, in sci-fi or in science, but honestly, it's in the world, right? The way Jules Verne, predicted submarines, and the military was actually inspired by the vision of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and the Nautilus to create, submarines. And there was some person who said it's as if claiming Jules Verne invented the submarine, and the authoritative people from the process spoke up and said, no, the modern submarine really was very much inspired by Jules Verne and 20,000 Leagues. And, more modern example where modern cell phones are inspired by the communicators from Star Trek. It's real. Sci-fi writers in great degree shape the world, and if not actually shape it, predict it. Because if there's a certain inevitability to certain technologies and capabilities and form factors, it is imagined first and made real through the future tellers, the precognitors or whatever of sci-fi. You listen to Elon Musk talk, and he will directly credit sci-fi books that most people have never even heard of, books and authors that most people don't even know exist, that I am even only aware of because of a good friend who is a much deeper sci-fi reader than I am. As much as I read, I only just still scratch the surface. And Scott McDonough, who I was a co-dog walker in the old neighborhood of Inwood, really introduced me to a lot of excellent authors, the most important of which is Ian M. Malcolm, a sci-fi writer, a British one, who wrote the Culture series, from which Elon Musk is lifting many ideas, namely the Neuralink, most gloriously the Neuralink, the way to interact with the brain through implants that can basically read your mind and have some external computer literally be an extension of your body. The merging of humans with tools. And Elon Musk is also quoted as saying things like the particular tools are not that important. It's the problem solving. You're faced with a problem, how to make a good electric car. You start with first principles, you count the atoms, all these wonderful Elon Musk-isms. You change the manufacturing technique, getting rid of all the stupid stuff that's in manufacturing because of tradition and lack of questioning, lack of re-inspecting things, stuff that in an older sense we would look at it as the teachings of, say, Edward Demings from the post-World War II era, the person who turned Japan from having a reputation for low quality to having a reputation for high quality, right? The German and Italian cars were the high quality cars, and the Japanese cars were the low quality, compromises, especially following the OPEC oil embargoes of the 70s, where the United States was flooded with higher fuel efficiency but cheaper Japanese cars. And then over time, through a process called TQM, total quality management, processes that were applied all over the place. Harley Davidson came back from the brink, the motorcycle company, because of these same principles, where you actually have short feedback loops on the manufacturing lines, where people who are responsible for the running of the equipment can say, hey, why do we do things like that? That's pretty stupid, and run it up the flagpole, run it up the process, like a suggestion box type process. And the very product gets improved from the manufacturing floor, from the factory floor. Is that not amazing? And people like Elon Musk, while not the most creative geniuses in the world, are in fact relentless process improvers and keen observers of process. Some of the biggest geniuses and achievers in the world, people who actually got stuff done to the point of becoming household names and iconic symbols for what they represent, were often humble in their actual knowledge and capability. And although they knew how they were viewed by other people, they would occasionally vomit up the little nuggets of humility and admission that they were actually of average intelligence, and it was all their almost anal retentive, obsessive compulsive behaviors surrounding a perhaps little bit higher than average intelligence mind that results in having an impact on the world impact. Benjamin Franklin comes to mind. Read his autobiography. Weird, but someone who grabs the reins of their own being and demonstrates that self-determinism free will really probably is a thing, but self-determinism and free will is a thing because of a process of self-examination and outward observation and questioning. You look inward and you question, you journal, you write, you articulate your thoughts, you put abstract thoughts through tools, the tools of language, to flesh out and come to know yourself. These abstractions are not well understood by your very own thinking brain until you cram them through your language center and you hammer and saw your, mental constructs into more concrete, your cloudy mental constructs, your difficult to communicate mental constructs into much more rigid, formal words and sentences, mental constructs that can in fact be shared and be decoded. So you learn to encode. You use communication tools like language to encode so that other people with the same set of fairly easy to acquire tools, right? Language, the spoken language at very minimum, which you get naturally because it's programmed into you by your parents and society and the media. From the Apple Store at One Infinity Lane, One Infinity Loop, before they moved it to the UFO construct, right? So you're asking, who the heck am I? Who am I talking to? I've been to Microsoft's headquarters. I've been on visit. So I have enough valid opinion. I can produce enough economic product that I am valued enough, or at least once upon a time, these were in my young days, to be sent different places to give training. To give training to Microsoft on Scala multimedia, digital signage, on Amiga computers, nonetheless, back in the day. They shipped those Amigas into Microsoft and sat down a bunch of Microsoft people in front of Amigas, and I taught them how to use Scala. And I'm sure, Microsoft had their own, agenda, but boy, that was my first exposure to true narcissists. I'll tell you, there were people in the Microsoft environment who would not let a class be conducted, and I learned how to use strategies to corral people who wanted to derail the entire class, staying in lockstep in progress to get through a lesson for their own, whatever it is, entertainment, hearing their own voice. Now, some might say people in the teacher position have a touch of the same big dog, and they do. People who work their way to the teaching position often want to hear their own voice and have the power kick of, shaping minds and that power and influence. But when you're in a class and you're teaching people how to use a tool, and then one of the students speaks up and tries to play that role, and basically not to teach, but to derail, to push it in every direction. And I don't remember this person's name, but it was the first time I was like, does this person not know why everyone was brought into the room? Do they not value everyone else's time? Are they not interested in getting the same rewards out of this as everyone else? And that was at Microsoft, on their Microsoft campus, on giving Scala multimedia digital signage training to Microsoft employees. It was bizarre. And, we got through it, and the techniques I used to corral it were long, slow silences after they asked their questions, so that it could almost resonate through everyone's head. So it wasn't just me being put on the spot, but it was everyone. And then I would pose it to the question. I would pose the question to the group. I can go, look, we do have a certain amount of material to get through today, and if I follow these tangents, we will not. And I can answer them in brief, and we can get back to the agenda, or not. How would the class like this to proceed? This is not, certification. You not getting credits in anything. So it's not really held to that rigid form. So how would you like me to play it? And basically the group of other Microsofties overruled this one person, and we got through the whole course. It was really interesting, and I've encountered other things like that. Certainly the sysadmin back at Scala was that same sort of personality who would prefer to hear their own voice over any conversation that was occurring, no matter what point was being made, no matter what the goal of the gathering was. The system administrator used it as an opportunity to demonstrate dominance, to basically pee on everyone else's opinion, and to show how they were the fount of all knowledge, right or wrong, as people around them like to say, and somehow, for some baffling reason, protect that person. They should have, I can count at least 3 different occurrences where they should have been fired. Oh, me too, for that matter, for speaking up, right? For having the guts to saying they drove away that customer. We had that $1 million revenue customer because of their behavior. We don't anymore. It's a direct cause effect. They should not be given their chance. That was their chance. Let's keep our customers from now on without rubbing every single one the wrong way. Now, I think that's when I first became an asshole. I think that's when I first gained the capacity to be an asshole, calling out the behavior of other people. And then I went through another round of growth learning just to keep my mouth shut, to offer those bits of myself which were of economic value, and to keep my opinions to myself. And when you had to face down a narcissist, like in that case in the Microsoft Scala multimedia class, to use as few words as possible to get back on trail with everyone's egos being intact, as reasonably intact as possible. So you take notes. I learned techniques for, here, let me take a note on that, and I'll follow up with you after class. And then you just move on as if you didn't miss a beat, as if it didn't affect you, as if they're, a lot of people want to make a ding in the universe. A lot of people want to make a ding in you, the you universe. So, that colored much of my life after that, and even much of my personal life. My marriages tended to follow that same pattern. I had brought a lot of economic value to my marriages, but when it came time to being equal partners, there was nothing equal about it. It was their way or the highway. So you can't be too soft-spoken. And one of the things to do is, when you become these, conflict, aversion, but still profoundly capable people, is to be careful about what situations you put yourself in the first place. If you feel like you have that special gumption, that special drive, the combination of intelligence and capability and determinate, perseverance, persistence, the thing of actual value. Again, back to Ben Franklin. And you know who else said stuff like this? You wouldn't believe it, because their reputations are for the megalomania, right? Sir Isaac Newton, right? Isaac Newton, in his Principia Mathematica, opens up with, I don't know, WTF, I don't know what is really going on, and I don't know who could say that they could understand what could be going on with this spooky action at a distance, right? Everyone has a problem with spooky action at a distance, and they call it a different thing. But Newton was struggling with the actual nature of gravity. What is gravity? What is this thing that works between bodies that cause them to attract? And he opens the Principia Mathematica with, I don't know, but, here's some consistent math that always works for, orbiting bodies, orbiting celestial bodies and such. And it's the same thing that makes an apple fall, right? Things can go into orbit if you shoot them into the air from a big enough cannon, right? That kind of stuff was the Sir Isaac Newton insights, but precisely why he could not say, and he freely and very humbly, right at the front of his great works, said, I don't know, let's talk algebra. And the same was the case with Benjamin Franklin. If you are persistent enough in your observations, if you follow the scientific method, if you have a question and you make observations to answer that question, and you do that persistently over time, and then you make new hypotheses and theories based on that, and then you test those, over time you're going to really put a lot of stuff together and have profound capabilities. Wow, before you even know it, where you're going. So I'll wrap it up there, and I'm going to wrap it up on the point that, I'm 52 years old. I'm older than Elon Musk, yet I want to make some sort of impact. Have I lost my chance? Is there still opportunity? Well, with the many-to-many communication model that exists today in media, and bringing back the methodology of the long tail, I'm going to poke my way through using those little provisions, little openings that are available on the different medias of the YouTubes and the TikToks, and the Google search, where I've made my career so far. Expand it and teach people how to take up tools that they can internalize that are not proprietary. I'm sitting here and I'm seeing the deers run along the beautiful cliffs. Wow, I miss this area. Anyway, that was my thoughts on this drive. Time to do my final unpacking of the storage thing and shut this thing down and be New York based permanently here forward. And I'll talk to you soon, and don't forget to subscribe and all that stuff.